Welcome back, Mistakes listeners. This is Dave, and I'm excited to have you back. This week we looked at a show called Voltron Force. It's a part of the Voltron cinematic universe. Anyway, fun episode to watch. This episode was recorded on 11/7/2015 or November 7th, 2015. This is episode 35. 35, woo! Anyway, you can follow us on Twitter at Parent Mistakes. And you can like us on Facebook at Parenting Mistakes. Hey, sit back and enjoy the show. Todd, welcome back. Glad to see you.
It's good to see you too.
How are you doing?
I'm doing okay.
Yeah, what's happening this weekend? Anything good?
I ran a 5K this morning.
Really?
Yeah.
You did?
Yeah.
5K, that's nothing less like what? A mile and a half? In
American
terms?
3.1 miles.
3.1 miles.
Excellent conversion.
Yeah.
This is why you don't test well, right?
No, that's right. Well, you know, the Canadian measurements.
That math. Yeah, that's
the
right.
Canadian measurements are never so good for me.
No, I can tell.
Hey, so I wanted to continue some of the dialogue that we had from a previous episode. Not that I want to be serialized or anything, but we actually, so when we had children, which was recently, within the past, say, 5 to 6 years, we actually got documentation from the government. Do you remember receiving documentation from the government?
Could you be more specific?
Okay, we got documentation from the government on how to raise children. Did you get any of that?
Did you get this in the hospital?
No, we got it through the mail. Like,
really?
Obviously, yeah, they knew. Obviously, the hospital had registered our children.
I was going to say, how did the government know you were with child?
Well, my wife and I went to Bethlehem, and we were registered.
You registered with the government?
That's
yes.
Right.
No. Okay.
No, I think the hospital notified the government that we had a child.
Okay.
Right? Because they're always like, the people like numbers. They like the numbers in the government. They want to know when people are going to be able to pay taxes and stuff like that, right? So we got this documentation and told us, like, you know, literally there was some basics in parenting, like this is when you should feed kids, this is how much food they should be intaking, their chloronic intake, right?
Right.
And that actually didn't come from the hospital, it came from the government. But one of the facts that I found very interesting in all of the paperwork that we received was the government said no more than 2 hours of TV a day. Now, I've mentioned that before. But the reason I have that stat, or the reason I had that information, was that the government told me that our children should not be watching more than 2 hours a day. This is actually going somewhere, I promise you.
Okay.
So last week when we talked about the show that we were talking about, doesn't matter, basically saying, it was Avengers Assemble, and I was saying, your child is now occupied, say, a half an hour of the 2 hours of minimal time that they should be watching TV. And we were kind of hinting or suggesting that perhaps watching 4 episodes or filling your 2 hours of, say, something like Avengers Assemble, which we kind of both established it was violent for children, was probably not a good idea.
Okay.
So I come to you this week with the pop quiz, right? And I find this utterly fascinating because I don't know, and I was trying to process it myself, what of those 2 hours of free TV time stated by the government should our kids be watching during that time?
Okay.
Right? And is it so the suggestion that we were making was that possibly filling your 2 hours of time full of content that is not, I like our term, edifying, is probably not a good 2 hours spent. Then I was thinking, so is it like a buffet table then? So like to counter the age of, or the Age of Ultron, sorry, to counter the Avengers show, do you counter that with a half an hour of Arthur? That way they kind of counterbalance themselves. Is it, or, like, should they just be watching 2 hours of Sesame Street because it's full of education? Now, we know that there are problems with Sesame Street, too. Everything has their problems. Is it just strictly entertainment? Should we watch 2 hours of ponies? Should we be even going even further and saying not only are we the parent monitoring what they're watching and saying kind of yes or no, but should we also be delivering them 2 hours full of enriching content?
Okay.
Versus, or is it the kid's choice? Like, hey, you got 2 hours. We've approved of this show, so you're going to pretty much, baby, you're a boy, you're going to watch all these crazy action sword, I'm going to hit you in the face type shows? Or do we try to steer them in a direction that says, well, here are a bunch of cartoons that we actually do find excellent and edifying, and you should be watching these?
Well, you write really terrible test questions.
Yes, I do. I don't.
That was like 13 different questions all in one.
That's right.
Okay, before I answer that,
do you see where I'm going here? Do you
I
understand?
sort of see where you're going. Yes, through the mist.
through the. Sorry, viewers, it's me.
That's right.
There's actually a portion of that part where I was like looking at myself, going, "Oh my Lord, Burrito Man."
Okay, so when you read this, if you recall, did our elected officials give you also guidelines on content and or age ranges?
It did not. It was just
or did
very
it just
specific.
say kids no more than 2 hours of
No
TV?
more than 2 hours of TV a day was all it said. It did not direct me as to, hey, you shouldn't be watching this or you should be watching that.
Okay. So that's a complex question, because then you are sort of going down the road of saying, is this just about screens? Because is it just about being in front of a screen?
Sure.
Because then you're getting into issues of your eyesight and how your brain processes content on a screen without even getting into what the content is. So I don't know if the government's going that direction. You know what I mean?
No, I totally, and I think it actually is. Okay, so if we take this a step further, one of our objectives in parenting mistakes is to help parents out, figuring, basically kind of reviewing. I don't want to say reviewing because we don't give a score or anything at the end, but just kind of navigating some of these shows and figuring out what's going on and kind of giving you a heads up or a thumbs down on what's going on with these shows. And I was trying to figure out, like, what, for us at Parenting Mistakes, what is sometimes the end objective? And last show it got even more interesting, and they were suggesting that too much of one thing, say during this 2 hour period, might be too much too.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's an interesting discussion. Ultimately, I think you go back to, and there aren't easy answers to this, but is it worse for your kids to just spend a lot of time in front of a screen, or is it worse for your kids to watch shorter amounts of, say, inappropriate content or content that's not good for them?
Right.
I mean, that's the hard part.
Right.
I mean, do you say, okay, a 22-minute episode, which is not a lot of time in the grand scheme of the universe, is that worse if they're watching something that is way above their maturity range versus them just sitting there watching 2 hours of Sesame Street, which is probably on the friendlier end of the content scale and may actually have some educational outcomes?
Yeah, So I was really struggling with this because it's what we do right now in this podcast, but I was actually thinking to myself that maybe even the better option is, so it's so confusing, it's so hard to navigate, that the better option is just take your kid on a hike for 2 hours.
Well, that's the thing. So I think for us as parents, as our kids have grown up, time and content have gone hand in hand. But I think for us, time has been sort of the first boundary in terms of saying, okay, and we're probably more on the conservative scale than some of the parents that are out there. And we're not here to dispel or dispense, I should say, ironclad parenting guidelines. But for us, when our kids were growing up, particularly when they're younger, we would say 30 minutes a day of screen time, which is about one show. And if they were playing games, 30 minutes of playing games. And then we would maybe loosen the reins a little bit, say on Saturday morning. Getting up on Saturday morning, nobody has to be anywhere. A little bit more time in front of a screen before we get to exciting family chores, that sort of stuff. But content is still right alongside. Time for us is 1 and content is 1A.
So I hear what you're saying, and you're going off on the screen time thing, but in our house, one of our objectives is that our children become good decision makers. So I think during that time, content actually is important. And I'm not saying you're not disagreeing with that.
Right.
I think that the objective as parents right now in helping folks try to navigate this crazy media thing, and I think it's inescapable. It's just a part of our culture. It's who we are as Americans. Is that our children, on their own, eventually in time, will start to make good content choices. And to start them off to say, hey, here is the selection of different shows that we think you should watch or can watch, and in hopes that we're actually offering them a good selection of shows.
Right.
So that ultimately down the road, they themselves will say, you know what, this content just isn't for me. I'd rather go with the good stuff than just the garbage. Really, right now, we're sitting in a world right now where Kim Kardashian, who literally is nothing, like there's no content other than just strict entertainment and advertising value there, and people are drawn to it by droves, and I'm like, that is not the world I want to live in, right?
Correct.
I'd rather have down the road this generation of kids making good entertainment content choices. I mean, there is a reason why William Shakespeare came along, right? The idea there is that we want good, in-depth content and entertainment for our folks. We don't want the Kardashians, and I don't want to rag on the Kardashians. Everybody else does it, but at the same time, it goes about the theme of it's just not edifying. Again, it's a great discussion to have, but I think, again, our objective is to hopefully give parents a good selection of shows to pick from so that eventually their kids, along with them, will start making good entertainment choices so that, say, 20 years from now, they won't even know what the Kardashians are. They won't know what horrible reality TV is. I mean, this is big pie in the sky. Right. Objectives here, but I thought it might be a good discussion for you and I to have on this show.
Well, at least with the time constraint, when the government does come out and do this, and various nonprofits will do the same thing, at least with a time thing, you're suggesting to parents, hey folks, this is not something to just let your kids do with an unlimited time period.
Yeah.
If your kid wants to sit in the corner and read books all day long, probably a better choice.
Mm-hmm.
If they want to hike with their mom and dad for 5 or 6 hours, fantastic. No limits there. But media should probably cut it off.
Yeah. Well, but just going on books too, I mean, what are they reading? Right? I mean, it's another question. For me, I think, and for you, it also is about content, right?
Right.
What's enriching? What's making you a better human being? And also, how are you relaxing, right? And I think we've talked about that as well with video games. Like, hey, when you escape, how are you escaping, and are you really escaping when you're escaping?
Right.
So all that to say, we actually this week had a listener request, our first listener request.
I don't know. Should we force a segue here?
Well, I just wanted to acknowledge that we had a listener request, which is good.
No, you didn't force us. Get it? Come back.
If you could see me reeling it in.
I'm
reeling it in.
I'm forcing the segue.
Say it again, Todd.
3, 2, yeah, okay, there you go. Need the sound effect.
What's my sound effect?
Yeah, I don't know. The awkward segue sound effect.
Well, you could come up with that on the soundtrack, right?
Okay,
We need to have a segue soundtrack sound from you.
Okay.
Yeah, something like
So
that.
for the people that don't know what we're talking about, we watched Voltron Force. Yes?
We did. I totally did. I was there.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So Voltron Force is I guess they call it a sequel. It's sort of nowadays it's confusing because there's sequels, but then there's like reboots, but then there's also reimaginings.
Right.
So, yeah, or alternate universe, or, I don't know.
Sure. You just said them. You just said them all.
Canon expansion. I don't know what you would call it.
Right.
Anyway, because there was an 80s animated series called Voltron.
There was.
And now this is the new version, which has the same general idea of people that are in these big, what are they, lions?
Yeah, they're lions. But you couldn't tell?
Well, yeah. I was just going to say
you thought they were tigers.
Cats.
I say
large cat.
Okay. Well, okay. You know what? Maybe they weren't lions because they don't have manes.
No, they are lions.
Okay.
They are lions. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to be, careful there.
Well, they're not just cats because that's the Thundercats, but that's a different type.
Sorry, Voltron fans. They are lions.
Sorry, Voltron fans. We're gonna get lots of hate mail now.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is there are 5 people that operate these 5 robot lions, and when the 5 robot lions need to unite, they all become the arms and legs and torso of this big Voltron character thing that can do good things and
form blazing sword.
Beat up the bad guys.
Sure.
And in this particular version, we have sort of your standard plot device that we see with sequels or with reimaginings, is that now we have the junior members of the Voltron group, which I didn't watch the 80s Voltron, so I don't know if there was
I did. I actually watched quite a bit of the.
Was there like a minor leagues?
No,
there was not.
And there are different versions of Voltron throughout the 80s. There was a Vehicles Voltron, and obviously the more popular, dare I say, the more popular Lions Voltron.
Okay. So, what'd you think? Did you like this?
Yeah, again, it goes back to some of our previous discussions. It's a beat 'em up. Right? So the way that we answer our problems is by hitting the villain in the face. But let's just cut to the chase. For a lot of these shows, if you actually every show had a peace talk in it where, hey, let's try to reason with the villain, and the villain just keeps on punching, eventually you're forced into a position to punch. Right? Which is all what we want anyway, so let's just cut to the chase and start punching. Right? So I'd say a lot of the action in the show is way over the top. So the show got interesting on several different levels and then just totally blew it for me. So the idea here is that the Voltron crew is kind of training the young bucks on how to be Voltron. Did I say Ultron? I did.
You did.
I said Ultron.
That's okay.
I meant to say
enough.
Voltron. Yeah, too much Avengers. Jeez. All right, so the Voltron crew is training their apprentices. The apprentices are unhappy with the training, so they decide to take it upon themselves to go to Planet Doom to take on a Voltron mission, which they haven't taken on, to get some sort of unique substance and complete the mission and prove to the core mentors that they are valuable, these classic teenagers that just want to do more than they should, and they bite off more than they can chew. Although the difference, there's some, like I said, some unique elements. So 3 of the lions take off to Planet Doom. The kids are trapped or caught by the evil guy, which means the Voltron crew is left without 3 lions. So the evil guy's like, oh, they're shanked. And not only that, but I've been juicing up with this special chemical, and this is my opportunity to take down the Voltron crew. Well, as it turns out, it doesn't matter because everybody's so overly superpowered, they don't really need lions at all. In fact, some guy they just automatically have a power in which they can form a sword on their own or form laser guns on their own and take on literally legions of bad guys.
Right.
Without the cats. Without the lions. which I thought, this is ridiculous. You finally hamstrung them, so they're going to have to think it out. Like, how are we going to take out this entire troop? But it turns out they have everything it takes anyway to do it. And actually, every time the villain had an edge, suddenly the writing would switch like back and forth, back and forth. Everybody had an edge over everybody else to the point where it was like, this is just pointless. I don't know what's going on, right? Other than one guy can beat up another guy, the other guy can beat up another guy. There was nothing that was death-defying, nothing that was thrilling. It was just, hey, let's just throw a bunch of punches. It was a punch show. Punch, punch, punch.
Right.
Right? Eventually they get their cats back. Right? They form Voltron, which I'm pretty much sure they do in every show, right? Hey, let's form Voltron and let's do this. Although this time it happened uniquely because they used the red cat instead of the black cat. Oh, I keep saying cat, but lion.
It's okay.
All that to say is, like, was it interesting? It was almost interesting, but the writers made it uninteresting by just saying, well, ultimately these things are going to happen. I did think of an interesting thought about the new modern age is that if you get the villain to dialogue, you can delay the villain's plan. You've seen this in movies now of recent, right? Hey, let's just get the villain to dialogue, and he'll start dialoguing or monologuing, and that's the opportunity we'll have. I think the opposite is true, where these heroes have the chance to actually form Voltron. It takes, like, what, 3 minutes?
Right.
That's when the villain should strike. Every time Superman is in there, is in the changing into the hero, that's the time you need to get them. The villains need to pick up on this trend. This is just a side note. It's not really anything other than like that. You see this all the time. Like, there's a sequence in the cartoon that's always filler in which the heroes always get the opportunity to power up and take on the day. And it always takes a certain amount of time, and I'm like, it's just cliche. And some point, some villain, some writer out there is going to figure out, oh, well, this is the superhero's version of a monologue or a dialogue, right? Was it entertaining? Ultimately,
Yeah, when I'm watching this, I don't know. Again, we've talked about this before. Is it okay to just have a show that has a incredibly predictable formula? There's going to be a very thin sort of plot device at the beginning, and at the end, as you said, the ongoing gimmick is that they're going to form Voltron and beat up the bad guys, and it's over. So we beat this one to death. I always had to find it hard in that I still find some kids shows to be entertaining.
Oh yeah,
because they're well written and there's some good dialogue, and you can tell that it was written by people that sort of know that adults are watching or adults enjoy this. This felt very kind of 80s to me. Sure. I almost felt like in the 80s there was sort of this thing, particularly even with adult shows like action shows, A-Team, Knight Rider, Airwolf, those types of shows, where the plot was pretty meaningless in some ways. You just know that at the end we're going to do something with gadgetry and save the day.
Sure. MacGyver, A-Team, yep.
Yeah.
You said it.
And I don't know if that's... I always, again, think about it through the lens of what do we want the kids to get from this? Do we want the kids to get just sort of this warm fuzzy that the good guys always win, no matter how stupid they are? Or do we want them to get some sense that the good guys win because they actually use some sort of critical thinking skills to overcome what the bad guys are doing?
Which we got a little bit from Avengers Assemble. And you know what? I couldn't agree with you more. I think it kind of goes back to this. Out of all these beat-em-up shows, which one is the best? Well, this is just another beat-em-up show.
Right.
And there are other better beat-em-up shows. And I think my frustration with the show is that there were actually some unique ideas. I like the Apprentice idea. Squandered. I like the idea that maybe some of the apprentices have chosen powers. Squandered. I like because there's just no impact to it. It's just they had some really good ideas, but there's no jeopardy whatsoever. And so at the end of the day, you're like, it's just another beat 'em up show.
Yes.
So what I'm saying is that nobody's challenged in the show, really. And because nobody's challenged, there's no thinking behind it. You just know that at the end of the show, Voltron is going to form, and there you go. So as a parent, I'd say, yep, that's exactly what you're going to get. And I would say, go for a better beat 'em up. I don't know if, as we get into our beat 'em up suite here, we gotta kind of determine what are our better beat 'em ups, because it is this problem of, well, we could have this peace talk at the beginning, but at the end of the day, it's just going to start throwing punches because the villain just wants to throw punches, and he just wants to take what we have, so we have to throw punches. At the very least, make it challenging. At the very least, make it interesting, or place the heroes in a place where they've got to make some difficult choices. And none of that happened.
Right. It was Rock'em Sock'em Robots, and at the end, they formed the giant Rock'em Sock'em Robot.
Yeah, and like I said, the disappointing part is like they had some great ideas that they just didn't use.
Yes. Is that it?
That's it. That's all I've got.
We can't form any sort of Voltron here, at the end of our podcast. And okay, folks, you can't see on the podcast. Dave's hands. That's right, blazing sword.
Maybe I could put a blazing sword sound effect in there.
We'll form a blazing social media plug. How about that?
Oh, there you go. Yeah, sounds good to me.
Right. Follow us on Facebook, Parenting Mistakes, or Twitter, Parent Mistakes. Feel free to tweet to the show, post comments on Facebook, and yeah, I think that's it.